We all have someone we talk to even after they're gone. Some call it grief, others call it love that never found a place to rest. For Jason Statham, that place was a quiet cemetery on the edge of town, rows of names, rows of memories, and a silence heavy enough to carry both. He came there twice a week, same time, same routine. But one morning, he wasn't the only one speaking to the dead. A little girl sat a few rows away, knees pressed to the earth, whispering through her tears. She looked too young to understand loss, yet her voice trembled like someone who'd lost everything. Jason watched from a distance, unsure why her pain pulled at something buried deep inside him. He didn't know her story, not yet. But soon he'd realize her tears were tied to his, in ways neither of them could have imagined. Before we continue, thank you for watching and for believing in stories that still carry heart, the kind that remind us some wounds don't heal with time, only with understanding. If you're new here, welcome. Stay with us till the end because what Jason discovers next isn't just a mystery. It's a reminder of how love can survive even after everything else is gone. The morning mist hung low over the cemetery, curling around the gravestones like quiet ghosts that never left. Jason Statham stood at the gate, a small bucket in one hand, a folded cloth in the other. The old caretaker, Harold, gave him a nod as he passed, though they'd long stopped needing words. Jason came every Thursday and Sunday, always at dawn, always before anyone else. He wasn't there for a crowd, he was there for memory. Down the third row, beneath an oak tree that leaned like it was tired of standing alone, lay a collection of names he never forgot. His unit, the men he'd fought beside, the ones who didn't make it home. He'd clean each headstone the same way, careful, deliberate, brushing off the dirt and leaves that gathered with time. Then he'd stand back, hands on his hips, and whisper something too soft for anyone to hear. "Still holding the line, boys," he'd say sometimes. Other days, he said nothing at all. But this morning felt different. As he knelt by Sergeant Cole's stone, he heard something faint, a small voice carried on the wind. At first, he thought it was the echo of a memory. But then it came again, clear and soft, like a prayer that didn't belong to him. He turned his head slightly. At the far end of the row, a little girl sat cross-legged in front of a modest grave. Her hair was tied in two messy braids, her jacket too big for her frame. In front of her sat an old framed photo, a cracked glass jar with a single wildflower inside, and a can of soda she poured slowly into the dirt. Jason watched in silence. She couldn't have been older than 10, too young to carry grief like that, but there it was, heavy in the way she breathed. He tried not to stare. Grief was private, but something about her ritual, the way she smoothed the grass, the way she whispered after pouring the drink, stirred something in him. He looked back to the names before him, but the peace he came for had already been disturbed. The next few weeks, she was always there. Sometimes she came before him, sometimes after, but always to the same grave, always with that same small can. He started to notice details, the way she'd glance around before leaving, the careful way she folded her photo each time. He never heard her speak to anyone. Then one morning he arrived early before sunrise, before even the birds started singing, and still she was there. Kneeling, crying quietly. Jason hesitated at the gate. He wasn't sure if he should leave her to her moment, but something about that sound, the kind of crying that doesn't come from one bad day but from too many, made him step closer. "Morning," he said softly, keeping his voice low so he wouldn't scare her. She turned, startled, wiping her face quickly. "Hi. Didn't mean to interrupt," he said. "You come here a lot." She nodded, eyes down. "Every day." Jason tilted his head. "Every day, huh? That's a lot for someone your age." She didn't answer right away. "It's the only place that feels safe." Jason said nothing. He knew what that meant, maybe not her story, but the feeling. After a moment, he crouched down near his usual spot a few rows away. "Mind if I clean while you visit?" She shook her head. "No." They stayed like that, two strangers, each talking to the dead in their own way. As days passed, their silence became familiar. Jason would nod when he arrived, she'd wave shyly, and they'd each go about their rituals. But sometimes she'd talk, mostly small things. About her school, her cat, the way people at the foster home didn't like her much. Jason didn't pry, he just listened. Then one day, she asked the question that cracked something open. "Who do you visit?" she asked softly. He paused mid-wipe, looking at the row of names before him. "Old friends," he said, "people I served with." She blinked, "Like soldiers." He nodded. She looked at the grave before her. "My dad was a soldier too, I think." Jason frowned gently. "You think?" She shrugged. "I don't remember him much. He left when I was little. Mum said he was brave but sad inside. When she died, nobody talked about him anymore." Jason froze. A soldier. A mother gone. A child left alone. He forced a small smile. "Sounds like he loved you." She looked up at him, eyes wide. "You think so?" "I know so," he said simply. She smiled faintly and went back to arranging her things. Jason watched her for a long moment, the weight in his chest growing heavier. That night Jason couldn't sleep. He sat at his kitchen table, the soft hum of the fridge the only sound in the room. A picture frame sat before him, an old photo of him and his younger brother, Mark, in front of their father's fishing shed. Mark had always been the quiet one, kind, patient, with a laugh that made people forget their troubles. Jason had joined the service first, always promising his brother he'd come back soon. But when he finally did, the house was empty. No Mark. No sister-in-law. No niece. Just a single eviction notice nailed to the door, and a stack of unpaid bills that told the rest of the story. Jason had searched for years, followed every lead, every name, every whisper, but the trail always went cold. And now, sitting there under the flickering kitchen light, he couldn't stop thinking about the little girl's face. Her eyes. They had the same green flicker Mark used to have. "No," he whispered to himself, "it can't be." But the seed had already been planted. The next morning, Jason went earlier than usual. The sun hadn't yet climbed past the hills, and the dew still clung to the grass. He waited by the gate, leaning against the fence, pretending to check his watch. She arrived like always, small backpack, careful steps, that same quiet sadness. "Morning," he greeted. She smiled weakly. "You're early." "Couldn't sleep," he said. "You?" She hesitated. "Same." He walked beside her this time, stopping a few feet from her spot. She sat, unpacking her usual things, the picture, the can, the flower. Jason knelt down beside her, and for the first time looked closely at the grave. His breath caught in his chest. Mark Statham. Beloved husband and father. The world tilted. He stared at the stone, frozen. The letters blurred as his pulse roared in his ears. The girl looked up at him. "You okay?" He tried to speak but couldn't, his throat locked. He forced a nod. Yeah, he stopped, swallowed hard. "He was your dad." She nodded softly. "Yeah, you knew him." Jason's vision flickered. Knew him. He wanted to say he was my brother, but the words felt too heavy, too sudden. He looked at the photo she'd brought, an old picture of Mark, holding a baby in his arms. He recognized the shirt. He'd bought it for him years ago. I think I did," Jason said finally. His voice broke slightly. "He was a good man." She smiled faintly. "He used to sing to me. I don't remember much, just that his voice made me feel safe." Jason nodded, eyes burning. "Yeah," he whispered, "that sounds like him." They sat there for a long time, the silence filled with ghosts and what-ifs. Eventually she packed her things, folding the photo carefully like she always did. "I should go," she said. "I have to get to work." Jason frowned. "Work? You're just a kid." She shrugged. "I help out at the bakery. They let me wash trays for a few dollars. It's not bad. I like the smell." Jason nodded slowly. "Good smell to grow up with." She smiled again, small but real, and walked away. Jason stayed by the grave long after she left, staring at the name etched into the stone. His brother. Gone. And the niece he'd been searching for, sitting beside him this whole time, talking to a photo he wasn't in. That night he sat in the same kitchen again, the same silence pressing against the walls. He pulled out an old shoebox from the closet. Inside, folded letters and pictures from his army days, a handful of medals, and one photo of Mark's wedding. He traced his finger along the image of his brother's face. "I found her," he whispered. "I found your little girl." But as the relief washed over him, another feeling followed: guilt. He'd promised to protect his family. And he'd failed. Now, all he could think about was how to make it right, without breaking her heart in the process. The next morning, Jason waited again at the cemetery. When she arrived, she smiled like always. "You're back." He nodded. "I told you Thursdays and Sundays." She giggled. "You really keep promises, huh?" He smiled faintly. "Some are worth keeping." They sat together, tending the graves in silence. But something in Jason had changed. The quiet had a new kind of weight now, a tenderness, a protectiveness he hadn't felt in years. He wanted to tell her the truth. But how do you tell a child that the uncle she never knew had been standing beside her all along? So he waited. He'd earn her trust first, learn her world, and when the moment was right, he'd bring her home. What Jason didn't know, though, was that someone else had been watching too. A man in a dark coat, parked just beyond the gate. He wasn't there to mourn, but to collect. And the little girl Jason had just found wasn't as safe as he thought. The cemetery was quieter than usual that morning. The fog lay heavy, and even the birds seemed to keep their distance. Jason stood by the same oak tree, his hands in his coat pockets, watching the little girl walk up the hill. She carried the same things: the soda, the photo, and the small jar for her flower. But something about her steps looked heavier. "Morning," Jason said softly. She smiled faintly. "Hi, Mr. Statham." He chuckled. "Told you to just call me Jason." She shrugged. "It sounds too grown-up." He smiled. "That's fair." She knelt down and began her little ritual, wiping the stone, setting the picture, pouring the drink. Jason watched quietly, pretending to clean nearby. He couldn't take his eyes off her, not because of curiosity anymore, but because of guilt, the kind that doesn't fade, no matter how much time passes. He wanted to tell her everything, that her father wasn't forgotten, that her uncle had searched for her for years, that her family's story didn't end in that graveyard. But he also knew that dropping all that truth on a child could break something fragile, the tiny bit of peace she still had left. So he waited. When she finished, she looked up at him. "You ever miss your family?" Jason froze. "Every day," he said quietly. She nodded like she understood. "I used to have one too." His throat tightened. "You still do." She smiled sadly. "Not really, they're all gone." Jason took a slow breath. "What happened to them?" The girl hesitated, her fingers brushed against the photo. "Mum got sick," she said softly. "Then she went away. Dad," she stopped. He wasn't the same after that. People said he drank too much. I think he was just sad. One night he didn't wake up." Jason's chest ached. The details matched everything he'd feared. His brother drowning in grief and debt. His sister-in-law gone too soon. And the child left behind in a world too cruel for her age. He crouched down beside her, his voice barely a whisper. "You've been coming here alone all this time." She nodded. "It's okay, it's quiet here, nobody yells here." He swallowed hard. "Where do you stay?" "With a lady from the home, Miss Parker. She runs a foster house." "Does she treat you well?" The girl looked away. "Sometimes." Jason frowned. That single word "sometimes" carried too much. Later that day, Jason drove to the other side of town. The kind of place where the paint peeled from buildings and people didn't ask questions. He parked outside a small, worn-down house with a crooked sign that read, "Parker Foster Care." He knocked. A woman in her 50s answered, wearing an expression that could curdle milk. "Yes." Jason smiled politely. "Afternoon. I'm looking for a little girl. Her name's Lily." Her eyes narrowed. "She's not here, she's at school." "I know," he said calmly. "I just wanted to ask about her. I'm a friend of the family." The woman crossed her arms. "Family? That child doesn't have any." Jason's jaw tightened. "She does now." The woman studied him, unimpressed. "Listen, mister, if you've got a problem, take it up with the council. I've got more kids than food as it is. She should be grateful she's got a roof at all." Jason's stare hardened, the kind that made men half his age step back. A roof means nothing if there's no kindness under it. The woman rolled her eyes. "You one of those bleeding hearts?" "No," he said softly. "I'm one of those people who don't look away." He left before she could answer, but the storm had already started inside him. That night Jason couldn't rest. He sat by the window, watching the rain streak down the glass, his mind spinning with questions. He picked up the photo he'd taken from his brother's old box, Mark holding his baby girl. He placed it beside a new photo he'd taken that morning, from his phone, Lily, sitting by the grave. The resemblance was undeniable. Her smile, her eyes, even the way she tilted her head when she spoke. Jason leaned back in his chair, whispering to the empty room, "I found her, Mark, but she's been through hell." And then something inside him shifted, that old instinct. The soldiers promised to protect, to fix, to fight for those who couldn't. He'd failed once, he wouldn't again. The next day, Jason went back to the cemetery, but Lily wasn't there. For the first time in weeks, her grave sat alone. He waited. An hour passed, two, nothing. He drove to the foster home. The door was locked, blinds drawn. He could hear faint voices inside arguing. He knocked once, then again harder. The door opened just enough for Miss Parker to glare through the gap. "I told you, she's not here." "Where is she?" Jason asked, his voice sharp. "She ran off this morning, probably went looking for trouble. That girl's always been strange." Jason's heart pounded. "You didn't look for her." The woman snorted. "Not my job to chase runaways. The police will find her." Jason's hands curled into fists. He leaned closer, his tone low and dangerous. "If anything happens to her, I'll make sure you're the one they find first." He turned and walked off before the anger could do what it wanted. He searched everywhere, the bus stops, the park, the alley near the bakery she'd mentioned. Hours passed, the sun dipping low. Finally, he spotted her, sitting on a bench near the river, her knees pulled to her chest, soaked from the drizzle. "Lily," he said softly, approaching. She looked up, startled. "Jason." He crouched beside her. "Been looking all day, you okay?" She sniffled. "Miss Parker got mad. She said I was useless. I didn't mean to break the plate." Jason exhaled slowly. "You didn't do anything wrong." She wiped her nose. "I just wanted to see Dad. I missed him." He nodded. "I know. He'd be proud of you, you know that." She looked away. "Nobody says that." "Well, they should," Jason said. "You're tougher than most people I know." She smiled weakly. "You sound like him." That broke something in him. He wanted to hug her, tell her the truth, bring her home right then. But instead he said, "Come on, let's get you somewhere warm." Jason took her to a small cafe by the corner. He ordered her hot chocolate and a sandwich, then sat across from her, studying the way she cupped her hands around the mug like it was a secret. "Lily," he said carefully, "you ever wonder if your dad had any brothers?" She tilted her head. "Mum said maybe, but they lost touch. Why?" Jason smiled gently. "Just curious. Families can get lost sometimes. Doesn't mean they stop caring." She nodded slowly, her eyes softening. "I'd like to have one." Jason's voice cracked. "You do?" She blinked. "What?" He took a breath. "Your dad, Mark Statham, he was my brother." The words hung between them, fragile, unreal. Her eyes widened. "You're my uncle." Jason nodded slowly. "Yeah, sweetheart, I've been looking for you for a long time." Tears welled up in her eyes. "You're real." He reached across the table, placing his rough hand over hers. "More real than I deserve to be." She started to cry, not the quiet kind this time, but the kind that breaks through years of silence. Jason squeezed her hand gently, his own eyes glistening. "You're not alone anymore," he whispered. The days that followed were a blur of paperwork, visits to social services, and quiet talks in between. Jason wasn't used to the system, the questions, the suspicion, the long hours of proving he was who he said he was. But every time he felt the frustration rising, he'd look at Lily asleep on the couch, clutching the old photo of her parents, and he'd find the patience. He'd already lost enough to bureaucracy and time. He wasn't losing her too. A few weeks later, things began to settle. Jason moved her into his small home by the hills, quiet, safe, filled with light that stretched across the wooden floors in the morning. He hung her parents' picture above the fireplace, right beside the flag from his old unit. She helped him clean the place, her laughter filling rooms that hadn't heard it in years. Sometimes she'd still visit the grave, but now Jason went with her. They'd bring flowers instead of soda, and she'd tell her dad about her school, her new home, her new life. Jason would stand a few steps behind, proud, sad, and grateful all at once. But peace never comes easy. One evening, as Jason locked up the house, a black car slowed outside his gate, the same one he'd noticed near the cemetery weeks ago. A man leaned out the window. "You Jason Statham?" Jason's instincts flared instantly. "Who's asking?" The man smirked. "Let's just say your brother owed people who don't forget." Jason's blood ran cold. "That was a long time ago." The man shrugged. "Debt doesn't die, mate. Maybe you should teach your niece that." Jason stepped closer, his voice low, lethal. "You come near her, and you won't walk away." The man's grin faded. "Careful, old soldier. You're not in the field anymore." Jason's eyes didn't move. "You're right, but I still bury what needs burying." The car sped off. Jason stood there for a long moment, watching the taillights disappear. He could feel his pulse in his throat, not from fear, but from the familiar burn of anger. He turned toward the window where Lily stood watching. "Everything okay?" she asked softly. Jason forced a calm smile. "Yeah, sweetheart, just some old ghosts trying to find their way home." That night Jason sat by the fireplace, staring at the photo of his brother again. "I'll keep her safe," he whispered. "I swear it." Outside, thunder rolled across the hills, the kind that warned of storms yet to come. And in that silence, he swore that anyone who dared to touch what was left of his family would regret it.